The 7 included Julius Blank and Gordon Moore, but not Noyce.
Bob was an extremely loyal person, but in the ensuing weeks, it became apparent that he could no longer get along with Shockley any more than the other 7.
With Noyce on board, the group headed to a San Francisco hotel to meet Arthur Rock and his colleague Bud Coyle. They agreed to form a company with the 2 investment bankers.
Bud Coyle whipped out a bunch of dollar bills in which he asked each one of us to sign our name to it to cement the agreement, and it has 10 signatures on it, the 8 of us, Art Rock and Bud Coyle.
The group was later mythologized in the industry as the Traitorous 8. But by spinning off from an established semiconductor company to form their own, Noyce and his colleagues set a precedent for the startups that would drive the growth of Silicon Valley.
What these men were doing was a revolutionary, a radical act. To leave a company, to start another one, this was not done in 1957. Looking at it with hindsight, it's easy to tell that if this was a revolution, what was happening at the Clift Hotel was the signing of the Declaration of Independence.
The Shockley defectors had an ambitious proposal. They wanted to find a corporation which would fund them to set up their own semiconductor division, effectively a company within a company, and then share the profits.
So we made up a list of about 35 companies, and it appeared that they were all interested, but none of them could see how this would fit in with their corporate culture. So they all passed on it until somebody told me to go see Sherman Fairchild.
Sherman Fairchild owned a New York-based technology company. He loaned Noyce and his colleagues more than $1 million to establish their own firm on the West Coast, with the option to buy them out if it was a success. The group had chosen the perfect moment to create their own company. Within weeks, the launch of Sputnik triggered the space race. The Cold War had become a battle of technology.
You saw an enormous increase, really just a dramatic spike in American spending on not just electronics, but anything that today might be called high tech. And this small group of 8 guys was in the vanguard.
In November 1957, Noyce and the team moved into an empty facility just down the road from Shockley Labs and began building their company, Fairchild Semiconductor, from scratch.
You start out with just 8 pairs of hands and feet and brains, and you had to build everything up from there.
We had a fairly simple goal. We were going to make this silicon transistor and get it on the market.
There's an excitement in the air. You don't know what it is, but it's there, and you see people working and getting things done and not fighting about it, but just doing it.
As Director of Research and Development, Noyce was the most senior of the 8, but he set about forging a collaborative culture that was ahead of its time.
It was crucial to Bob, I think, not to be Bill Shockley. He was not going to be paranoid. So it was a very casual, collegial atmosphere. Anybody could go talk to Bob. He essentially let his people run loose, entrusted them with the company, and they came through.
He was the essence of what I would consider a good leader. He could come to you and talk with you and see how he could help you. This is something that Shockley never did.
Another source of this type of thinking, undoubtedly, was again Grinnell. He was thinking back to the small town where he grew up. a place where whether you were the preacher's child or a farmer's kid, it didn't matter. You all were in the same classroom together, you played on the same sports teams, you were all together. And that, he thought, created a vibrant society.
Fairchild's early years were remarkably productive. Not only did the team build a commercial silicon transistor, they also devised a way of mass-producing the devices. A pattern of the transistor structure would be projected onto a wafer of silicon, using special lenses to shrink the size of the image. The projected pattern reacted with light-sensitive chemicals, printing the structure on the surface. This technique enabled entire sheets of transistors to be produced at the same time, and then cut up into individual chips and packaged. But actually joining different transistors into a circuit was intricate and painstaking.
Transistors were made in large sheets, and you made many of them at a time. When you made them into a circuit, you would take one of these, and then from some other source, you would take another one, and so forth, and this is the way you would build your circuit. Now, if you look at that, you think there must be a better way. After all, I'm taking these elements, I'm cutting them apart, putting them together so that somebody else can wire the things together. There should be some way of actually building the entire circuit on a single piece of silicon.
Noyce's colleague Jean Erny had suggested that a layer of silicon dioxide could act as a protective coating for an entire wafer of transistors. In January 1959, in what would be his key scientific insight, Noyce realized that Erny's process could enable all the components of a circuit to be printed and connected to each other on a single silicon chip. This meant entire circuits could be mass-produced. Noyce had found a way to manufacture ready-made integrated circuits.
This, as we know now, was a fundamental insight, really in some sense a world-changing insight. And yet, Noyce jots down his notes and does nothing. Every bit of energy at that company was focused on products that they knew would make them money. The integrated circuit seemed like a nice idea. Someday, maybe someplace, they would be able to do something with this, but not right now.
But 2 months after Noyce had noted his ideas, Jack Kilby, a researcher for Fairchild's rival Texas Instruments, announced his own integrated circuit. It was coincidence, but Kilby's notes for his invention predated Noyce's. Kilby's circuit, however, was made of germanium, now seen as an outdated material, and could never be commercially viable. Noyce's silicon chip could be. The two are now credited as the co-inventors of the integrated circuit.
Jack Kilby is the first person to come up with the idea of an integrated circuit, or at least the first one to write it down. Bob Noyce was the first one to come up with one that could be built in mass quantities. The first person to develop an integrated circuit that would then lead to pretty much any item you use today that has an on-off switch.
Fairchild now had a cutting-edge product on their hands. The problem was, it was so cutting-edge, there was no real market for it, as yet. Noyce, who had been promoted to general manager, had to find ways to publicize the device and convince customers to design uses for it.
This is a report on integrated circuits with Dr. Harry Sello.
Hello. We're here to tell you about a recent revolution in electronics.
The marketing guys said, let's do a talk and an explanation and take it right out to the purchasers and the buyers. All of them we can round up by way of a film and give it to as many at one time as we can.
You know, it's exciting to think that all of these functions are here today. They can be used, they're available. And it's even more exciting when you consider the number of applications that these can be put to. Actually, the uses of integrated circuits are limited only by those who are